Wine Crush. I'm Laura Lawson, and for my favorite loyal listeners out there, you will remember, I don't know, somewhere around 3 months ago, we started a great debate about a wine because of its price point. It was called Donna Estates, and it was my wine recommendation for the week. And there were a couple that said, how can you recommend something that's so expensive? Well, what was interesting is the majority of you stood up and said, absolutely, I would love to know of a collector's wine before Robert Parker tells me it's one. So because of that, I have twisted the arm of one of my dear friends who happens to be the vice president of Donna Estates to drag him on the show to talk a little bit about his wine and the sensation it is creating. So at this point, Pete Perry, welcome to the Wine Crush.
Hi, Laura.
How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. I'm fighting a little bit of a cold, but other than that, I'm fine.
That's quite all right. You probably got it from standing out at the barbecue, didn't you?
Absolutely.
That's what we're talking about today is men and their concept of barbecuing, how women do all the work and men just get to sit there and burn things on the grill.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing. Well, Pete, Donna Estates, of course, you know that you are near and dear to my heart, and we were fortunate enough to get to talk about your wines earlier in the year. Tell us a little bit about Donna Estates from someone that doesn't have a biased point of view.
Well, I think the first question we might want to start is what does it take to make a great wine? And I think in my mind it takes three things. It takes great vineyards, and I like to think that we have those. It takes an incredibly talented production team, and I think we've got that with a world-class winemaker named Philippe Melka. And it takes a proprietor with both deep pockets and a commitment and a long-term vision, and I think we have that as well. And when you have that trifecta, I think you've got a lot of things going for you. In our case, the winery is based in Rutherford, and not only in Rutherford, but in the very heart of the Rutherford Bench. And for some of your listeners, they may remember that some of the greatest wines in the 20th century made in America came from the heart of the Rutherford Bench, and with old standbys, the England Cask Reserve and the B.V. George Latour. Those really are legendary wines that have their roots in this area. So I think in our case, when we had a chance to purchase vineyard land in the heart of this famed appellation, we leapt at the opportunity and set aside the task of trying to make the best wines we could.
Pete, I think there's something that you are doing that obviously our forefathers could not do in the wine business, but to me, you seem to have done the most single-minded research into this. You and Melka and Mr. Lee got together and knew you only wanted to do one thing. You knew from the outset exactly what that one thing would be. Why did you decide just to do Cabernet? Was it a great confluence of events, or just the three things you said lined up for it?
I think the three things lined up, but ultimately I think Napa is best known for world-class Cabernet, and I think the best vineyards in Napa, by and large, are recognized by many as being Cabernet vineyards. And so when you're going to be a Napa-based facility, and if you want to make truly world-class wines that stand amongst the best in the world, I think you start with Cabernet, or at least a Bordeaux blend, a Cabernet-based wine.
Pete, you and I have had opportunity to talk on many occasions, and we kind of jokingly laughed about a $198 Cabernet coming out in its first nationwide rollout this year with the economy like it is. I would imagine that the groundswell of people accepting your wine has been beyond your belief, or what are your opinions on that?
Well, first of all, it's $275.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Winery retail, but that's okay. Why quibble over $77?
$77, $177, hell, who cares?
It's interesting. Could we have picked an absolutely worst time? I don't know, maybe this year in perhaps 1929 to launch a brand like this. But I've been very gratified, all joking aside, by the response in the market. Admittedly, this is a wine that's very difficult for most of us to deal with right now because of the economy. Even in the best of times, I completely expect that it's only a wine that might appeal to a few people that are genuinely interested in what is perceived to be great wine. But even in the midst of a lousy economy, I see a lot of people as I go out on my travels that are really excited about what this project represents. When they hear the story, when they taste the wine, the view seems to be, you know what, it's really expensive, but damn it, it's worth it.
Pete, I think a lot of times we find ourselves pandering to the lowest common denominator. But when you look at something of this quality and of this that I believe will be in full esteem in the next 10 years, I don't think we have a problem. There are people out there who still recognize an amazing bottle that truly captures terroir, and I think this is it.
Well, thank you. And if I can put it in another way, I think part of it comes down to how do we choose to spend our entertainment dollars. And for someone like myself who's very much into food and wine, it's not like I'm going to do this very often, but every now and then I'm going to spend a fair chunk of money to have a great bottle of wine with a nice meal. A lot of my friends may not share my view, but they may go out and spend all sorts of money on sporting events. What does it cost to go to a San Francisco 49ers football game? Probably north of $275 for a couple people. What does it cost to see an NBA playoff game? Well north of that. If you're into plays, well, if the best Broadway plays first run are going to be very expensive. And just as a kicker, I was in Texas not too long ago, and a friend of mine told me that he had spent $1,000 for 2 tickets for he and his wife to see Fleetwood Mac.
Oh, good Lord.
Would I do that? Well, probably not, but he really loved it, and it was a memorable experience for him and his wife, and it was worth it to them. So I think it sort of depends on, what makes a memorable evening or experience for you, and if wine's a part of that, then this is the type of wine I think that would appeal to you.
I was going to say, whoever the couple was that spent $1,000 for Fleetwood Mac, just go ahead, give me the $1,000. I'll send you a CD, and I'll put it on Donna, and we'll see which one wins.
Good call.
Before it's all said and done. Well, Pete, you're definitely a legend in Napa Valley. Ironically enough, we had an old buddy of yours on last week, Mr. Larry McGuire, and they were talking about their new Pinot project. Now, when you're looking at limiting a winery to doing only one wine, in the sense that you're only going to do Cabernet, do you find like you are yearning for other things? Do you want to see other projects, or are y'all going to stay focused on Cabernet?
That's a big question for us. We all like to drink great wine. And you know as well as I do that all of us that love great wine, we're always fascinated by where that next bottle of great wine is going to come from, and we want to try it. So all of us at our winery drink other wines in addition to great Cabernets, so we maintain a genuine interest in that. All I can tell you right now is that we're just focused on making Cabernet and making the best 3 single vineyard Cabernets that we can make. Down the road, we'll see if that takes us anyplace else, but right now, Donna Estates is all about making the best Cabernets that we can.
Pete, when I talked about Donna, there were some listeners that went out and bought bottles. And the one thing, they would send me back questions, and I couldn't answer them effectively. For those of you who have seen or need to see a bottle of Donna Estates, it's covered in lotus flowers. And they asked me, why is it covered in lotus? And I couldn't give them an intelligent answer. Can you tell our listeners why the label is designed as such?
Sure. Our owner, Hee-Sang Lee, is Korean. And as you may know, in some Asian cultures, the lotus flower represents regeneration, recreation, and rebirth. And in Hee-Sang's view, as vintners and growers, every year we get to do this again. We get to offer what Mother Nature brings to us annually.
So every time you get to start again, you start fresh.
That's right.
Well, once you already get great wines like you have, Pete, where do you think you're going to go?
You keep trying to make better wine. The next, as someone else has told me, the best bottle of wine hasn't been made yet. Although we're very, very happy with what we've been able to produce so far, the wine that we have on market, we're delighted with. But we know what's in barrel, we know what's coming, and we just think the best is yet to come. And not only just for us, but on behalf of all of our folks in the industry, I think generally speaking, winemaking has improved dramatically. Grape growing has improved dramatically in the last decade or so. And as these relatively new vines that are planted post-phylloxera gain more and more maturity, you're not going to believe the quality of wine you're going to see coming out of Napa and Sonoma and other places in California. They're going to be real showstoppers in the next 10 to 15 years.
I think we're going to see some great things. Pete, real quick, I'm going to touch on this because we're going to have a show on it later. You obviously mentioned your winemaker, Philippe Melka. He is one of the world-traveling winemakers. Explain how this works briefly to our listener. It's not like he is totally absorbed and sits there at Donna, but how does he come in and make your wine?
Well, that's a good question. Philippe is known as in essence, he is a winemaking consultant. He works for a range of different wineries, and he's made wines for wineries like Dominus and Dallaval, a Bryant family in the past, and currently he makes wines for brands like Vineyard 29, Lale, Gemstone, 100 Acre, a few other, and a range of others.
I was about to say, what terrible, terrible people to be associated with. Yes. Just awful.
Well, I have to tell you that when I started, that was the big question for me, because I wasn't sure that someone like Philippe would be able to give us the time that I felt our project warranted. And and I asked him point blank, I said, Philippe, how's this going to work? I'm real concerned about how many other folks you got on your plate. And he said, well, look at it this way. If I were a winemaker for a much, much larger winery, I'd be dealing with hundreds of acres of vineyards, dozens of different lots, and dozens of wines or SKUs. Yet I'd have to be responsible for doing that. Somehow it would be my responsibility, but I would have a team to help me, but ultimately it would be my call. With me, he says, it's a little different because although I'm making a number of different wines, they're all focused on the ultra-high end. And really, he said, to be perfectly honest, the challenge is not so much in making wine, but making sure I get along with my various proprietors.
And getting along with the proprietors is where it has to be. I understand that. Well, Pete, it is always a joy to talk to you and definitely enjoy having you involved. But right now we're going to have to take a break. But thank you for being on the show and talking about Donna.